Hello and welcome to episode 249 of Page One, the Writers Podcast. I'm Tarek.
I'm Marco, and thanks for joining us on the podcast where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, find out how they got into the industry, and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible. I say that, but we have been doing a run of episodes where we've not been speaking to writers. We've been speaking to what we have termed industry experts, agents, editors, and the like. So this is the last in that current little run of episodes, which I think people have been enjoying them. People always like to see what it's like over the fence, what the people making the decisions and how they make them, and all of that sort of
what
thing.
they're really looking for in your submissions.
Exactly.
I've had some really good chats with people like Ed Wilson and
Liza de
my
Block.
mind's gone blank now. Eliza Block,
Phoebe Morgan.
So many great people. I can't think of any of them. Phoebe Morgan, and they've all had very different approaches and different kind of focuses. So I think which is in some ways perhaps not that helpful, but I think it's always good to know who you're applying to, what they are looking for. So
absolutely. I think there's a lot of good tips there. So, so as I say, today we are speaking with someone that actually crosses all the categories I've mentioned,
all the streams.
Yes, agent, editor, and author.
That's right.
Kesia
We're chatting
Lupo.
with the wonderful Kesia Lupo today, who, as Marco said, is agent, editor, author, and a really interesting backstory. She's started off in editing, worked there for a number of years, jumped to agenting in New York, no less. So we've got some US agenting insight. Worked there for 12 years or so, and has now jumped back into the world of editing again for MacMillan's children's books, having also written a bunch of YA novels herself. So a real complete, full experience of the entire process from start to finish. Really good.
Yeah, and it is a really interesting episode. She gives a lot of useful insight into all of those roles, and also we discussed the UK and US markets and whether they're different and all of that sort of thing. You weren't in this interview, Tarek.
No, unfortunately, I couldn't make it.
Turning up, so it's just me. But I did. I done messed up, as they say.
Unfortunately, a step away for one episode.
Exactly.
Things
it turns
out
you are needed. Damn it. While this might sound, crisp and great audio, unfortunately, when I recorded this episode, I didn't realize that the computer had changed my mic to the webcam mic, which is an awful microphone.
Bloody computer.
So it sounded like I was underwater. Now, I've done my best to clean it up. It still isn't great, but it's as good as I could get it. But fortunately, you're not here to listen to me. You're here to listen to Kesia, and she does most of the speaking, I'm pleased to say. So, I just thought I should give you that warning. But we'll get straight into the podcast, and after a quick advert for a writer's notebook, if you're listening to this, not if you're watching it on YouTube. And we will be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat and to let you know about next week's episode, which is, of course, our 250th episode. So
I assume you have someone big lined up then.
Yes, indeed,
exactly.
Indeed. So, we'll get straight into it now.
On with the podcast.
So, when we start these episodes normally, what we have is an author normally. So I always say, did you always want to be a writer? Now, in your case, you are a writer. You have also been an agent and now an editor. I mean, what were your ambitions or goals when you were younger?
It's funny because when I was a smaller child, I wanted to be a journalist, so I wasn't
Right.
a million miles off. It was always something to do with words. That morphed into wanting to be a historian. I studied history at uni, but quickly figured out that I actually wasn't academic to that level. Like, I just didn't really enjoy the level of detailed study that went into that. So I had to kind of reassess everything. And I ended up doing a creative writing master's. So in terms of where I've ended up now, it really was being an author that was like the first the first step for me. Um, and through writing and meeting other writers and kind of discovering about the industry, that was like my gateway into being in publishing, which I think most kids and even teenagers don't really know much about, publishing industry. You don't really question it, do you? The book's
Well,
just a
exactly. I mean, I think that's true of adults as well.
Mm,
I think
value.
there's a process where people think you write a book and then I think they maybe think you find an editor and then it gets published, and that's the process. It's a lot more complicated than that, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
so I think I'm right in saying you worked as an editorial assistant at MacMillan. Um, uh, was your sort of first step into working in publishing? Is that right?
Yeah, it was actually an editorial services assistant, which
Right.
is, I often just say editorial assistant because people just don't know what that is, but it essentially means that you're working on, the copy edit and proofread stages of editorial rather than the early you're not working on any acquisitions or anything like that.
Right. Okay.
More polishing off the manuscript. So I was there, you know, back in and this was only so it was about 13 years ago, but we used to print out the manuscripts and like send them physically to proofreaders, and they would send them back marked up, and I was the person that would like go through and check the corrections, and it was that kind of thing. So it was very admin heavy. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was kind of my first intro. Um and weirdly it's at the same company that I am now, so I've kind of come full circle.
Full circle. Yeah. Yeah. We'll get to that. But I mean, so you had this first step where you were involved in that side of the editing process, but you then I think moved into freelance editing. Is that right?
It's funny, so my first thing after that was I moved to Chicken House, which is a small children's publisher,
Right.
and there I was in-house again, but I was now on the, traditional acquisition side. So I started as junior editor, just assisting with acquisitions and the early stages of editing, and moved up for 8 years through editor to senior editor. By the end of my time there, I was acquiring, and that was just across, middle grade and YA
Uh-huh.
fiction. Then this was the big change. We decided to move to the US, which is where my husband is from. Um, and because we were moving to the West Coast, which is completely the other side of the country from all of publishing, it wasn't really an option for me to be in house anymore. So
Right.
that is when I went freelance in the first instance. But also, as we're going to come on to, started agenting as well during that period.
Yeah, so I mean, so like you're picking up all the experience across the whole industry there. So yeah, starting the as the assistant, then eventually move up to acquisitions, but then move into freelance editing, and then agenting, as you say. I think that was Donald Mass agency, that you were agenting for. Now, in terms of what the role is, obviously agents and editors are different, but you're both looking for new writing and stuff like that. So what are the similarities and what are the differences in those roles?
It's a good question, because I do think there's a lot of crossover, but it is very different. So when you're an agent, you are at the very beginning of the whole process. So you are there receiving literally thousands of submissions from writers, and trying to sift through and find the ones that you think could sell. So you're kind of there's a lot more material. When you're an editor, you are looking at hundreds of submissions a year, like possibly I think I haven't had a full year here at Macmillan yet, but when I was at Chicken House, it was about 300 submissions a year
Right.
across a team of 3 editors, so essentially 100 each, which is much more manageable.
Yeah.
However, when you're in-house at a publisher, there's a lot of extra stuff that comes along with that. So you find yourself project managing, going to a lot of meetings. When you do want to acquire something, it's not just a case of literally just offering representation to an
No.
author,
Yeah.
signing a contract and moving ahead. It is like a lengthy process of, costing and like trying to get the company behind you to buy it. So I think the emphasis, they're both talent seeking jobs, you're both trying to, like you said, sign up writers essentially. But the emphasis for when you're in-house at a publisher is more on the business side of things. And as an agent, you're able to be a lot more flexible and creative and take a lot more risks.
Yeah. So yeah. So when you're an agent, you can love that voice and just say, right, I want to take this person on, and then hopefully you'll find somewhere for that
Mhm.
manuscript or whatever. But an editor in a publishing house, and I imagine it's the larger the publishing house, the more there are other voices that you have to accommodate. Essentially, is that fair to say?
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%. Like I've worked, Chicken House was a company of 10 people, and we had our managing director, Barry Cunningham, who was the editor that discovered Harry Potter back in the day, so incredibly experienced. But he basically he was the one you had to get on board, and within reason, everyone else had to be on board as well. But that's just a small group of people. When you're at somewhere like MacMillan or any big five, you have huge, teams essentially of, marketing and publicity and sales and rights. And, you'll go to an acquisitions meeting and essentially attempt to persuade all of these people that this is a good investment. And they have to, plug their numbers in essentially to your costing to say we think we're going to sell X thousand copies of this, and that will determine what you can, if you can offer, and what you can offer. So it's a very much more formal process than a smaller publisher where you may just have a conversation and all agree on an advanced level and then just go and offer. So it
yeah.
is very, very different depending on where you are.
I mean, has that changed over the years? And is the editor, have editors sort of lost some power in that sense? Because even for those we were talking about, you know, person on the street might not know how it all works, but I think they would have thought an editor, if they like it, they'll be the ones to make that decision. But now I think nowadays, as you say, marketing, publicity, sales, they all have a big say, and perhaps in some cases a bigger say than the editor in certain cases.
I think if you're really passionate about something, and this is just my experience so far, if you're really passionate about something, it is easier to get it through because I think people jump on board, with
Yeah,
passionate, pitches basically. So I do think there's still an element of like the editor is super important in terms of whether something can be acquired. I think what the big determinant is like how much you can offer and for instance, whether you're going to offer for world rights or not, or whether you're going to be able to offer a five-figure advance, or if the commitment is so low that you can only offer four figures, like that kind of thing is where all of those other stakeholders can sort of hamstring you a little bit. But frankly, my experience so far here has actually been super positive in that regard, and people seem very willing to kind of jump on board with something that you feel is, important and big and exciting.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I was going to ask about, you mentioned the sort of publishing itself is perhaps more risk averse than an agent picking up a query or something like that. Um, Albeit obviously agents have one eye on the commercial side of things as well. Can they sell it? But I wondered in your particular role, focusing on children's books, young adult books, middle grade, that sort of thing. Is it because at the other end of the market, in the adult market, we have heard from speaking to others and stuff like that their publishing is quite risk averse, and it is very, very slow to, if there's a trend, it'll sort of like romantasy is the big one, obviously, at the moment. You know, it's hard to get other things in at a level in publishing. And I just wondered, for children's books, is there a bit more variety? Is there a bit more opportunity for different types of stories and things like that?
I think at this moment there is. I can't speak to what it was like a few years ago, but right now, Romantasy is a really good example because I work on the first ink list, which is YA and crossover. So Romantasy has been enormous for us. But we are seeing people's appetites change slightly, not necessarily readers, but people in the industry, particularly foreign language publishers, but also, you know, shops essentially, so retailers who are looking to see what will be the next thing,
Right. Okay.
because this can't possibly continue forever at the same pace. So
Yeah.
right now is the time to like think about, is it time to move back to contemporary? Is it time to try dystopian or science fiction? Or, you know, I think it has to be really, really good to kind of break out at this moment, because it is a saturated romantasy market where, you know, that's just still doing incredibly well sales wise. So I think anything that's a bit different has to like be really standout good, but
Yeah.
it is a good time to be writing outside of romantasy, because we're all looking, we're all thinking, where can we go with this? What hits some of the same notes, but is different. So yeah.
Yeah, I do get the impression that publishers are almost waiting for one of these things to break out, something else to break out, and then the trends will start to change, I guess. So it's just that most of these trends, I feel, um, they tend to sort of ebb and flow a bit more. Romantasy, I feel people have been saying, "Oh yeah, it's going to, it's a trend that will die away," but it does seem to have lasted for longer than a lot of people seem to have thought.
Yeah, I think that's just testament to like how much people want to read
Yeah,
this kind of book, that, and it hits on so many very rich veins of, romance has been perennially popular among certain readership, but I think it's really broken out. And
yeah,
fantasy similarly, like with so many cultural phenomenon over the last like 15 years, like Game
yeah,
of Thrones, and the Lord of the Rings adaptations, and like
yeah,
people in general are a lot more open to both genres. So that's really kind of, you know it's driving that engine of romantasy. But I think those readers will want something different, and so romantasy combined with other romance combined with other genres perhaps, or fantasy that it goes in a slightly different direction, like maybe more horrorful directions. So I'm always
yeah,
thinking like, what can we you know what can we feed to those readers next? So it's
yeah.
not so much trying to follow or like see what's happening and then jump on it. I am thinking in terms of, can I set the tone of the next trend? Obviously it's very difficult to really control that, but it is fun to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we can go back to the world of agenting for a moment, I just wondered, you know, what when you were working as an agent, obviously you would tend to get that sort of query package. Is that how it worked? The same? I know you worked in America, and they sometimes have different things, but did you get like the cover letter, the chapters, and the synopsis, or was it just a query initially that you would get?
No, it was the whole package. Yeah, it's the same.
And so would you what part of that package is the most important to you? If it's not a great cover letter, would you keep reading? Would you look at the pages anyway? Would you always look at the synopsis?
I think the query letter is the most important part.
Right.
And
Okay.
I mean, I guess I can say for me, but I think in general, it's probably the most important part, because it is the first thing that most agents will open up. So I think, having a really strong query letter that shows a few things really, like that you can sum up your book like quite easily, that how your book fits into the market, but also how it stands out, and frankly displays like your writing ability in some way. Um, those things really go a long way. I wouldn't always read the synopsis. I would usually do query letter. If I like it, I'll dip into the extract and get a sense of what the story is like. Um, you know, does the voice cry out to me? Do I feel like I want to read on?
Yeah.
Um, and if I did, I might then sort of glance through the synopsis, or I might just sort of say, yes, this is good. I'm going to come back to it, or even I'm going to finish it right now and see what happens. So, yeah, it's I think the query letter is sort of the gate that you have to get through, and I probably rejected 80 to 90% of things based on the query letter, which is a lot. But when you have like 4,000 to get through, you have to be a bit brutal.
Yeah,
Um,
no,
yeah.
absolutely. But I suppose for those listening or watching, what are the big no's, the big don'ts when you write your query letter?
I don't like thinking of it in terms of don'ts because I think people get too fixated on not making mistakes, and I
Right.
think most people weren't making any mistakes. There wasn't anything wrong with most of these query letters. It was simply that it wasn't standout enough, or it wasn't like, you know, I guess what you're looking for is something where you feel if you pitched it to an editor, they would get excited, and like it feels like different and new, and like, there's a very high bar, I suppose is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, but if I
Was
was to kind of take the question as intended and be like, what to avoid, like, I guess anything that um you really want it to be quite formulaic. So I
yeah.
think people don't love that as writers because we all want to be creative and like put our own stamp on things, but you do need to follow the formula. And I think a sort of rambly or a query letter that doesn't have the information that you need is quite an obvious no. So that's just the basics. Do you have your opening pitch? That's sort of I always do it. This is how I structure it: an opening pitch that sort of says, "Hi, this is my novel X. It's in these genres, and this is like a one-line description of it, and also the word count." Then it's sort of a blurb, which is what you would read on the back of a book. So quite short, very punchy. Then a biog, and then sign off. And it
Yeah.
should all the information that the agent needs to be there. So basically, deviating from that is probably the biggest error you could make.
Yeah. What about one thing that authors never like as well is or some have difficulty with is the comp titles. It's
Mm.
like X meets Y or whatever, and I think sometimes people can get caught up and try to say, well, this is a new story. It's not really like anything else, but I think that can be a mistake if you put that in the letter. I
Yeah.
think it must just be to show that you understand where the book might be placed in the market and stuff like that. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think when you say, like, it's not like anything else, like, we know it's unique, like, it's
Mm.
not we're not
Yeah,
expecting it
that's
to
right.
be
Yeah.
exactly like the comp titles. It's basically telling you're trying to tell people that there's a readership out there
Yeah.
for this. So if you're saying there's nothing else like this, you're basically saying there's no readership, which is not your intention. Um, I would always say comp titles should go in that sort of first opening section, and they should be books that readers of your book would also like. So it doesn't have to be like an exact match, or like sometimes you can have really clever ones where conceptually you just find the two perfect books and it's like, The Matrix meets Lord of the Rings or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
But like what is more usual is like readers of Kristen Hanna would like this book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that it can be that sort of general, but you are looking for comp titles that are um, published within the last 5 years and commercially successful, because again, the message is there are currently in the current market readers who want to read stuff like this.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. I think another mistake people can make is to say, "Oh, this book that I've read is quite similar," but it might be a book that's not sold very well. So you don't want to put that in either. You want to put stuff that shows as a readership, as you say. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
And you were agenting in the US. Which I assume means that you mainly got US-based queries. And I just wondered if you thought there was a difference in the UK and US markets in your experience, and whether that difference is perhaps closing over time as well.
Yeah, I think it does depend what area of the market you're looking at, for sure. My experience was that because I'm British and because I was more known in Britain, I actually sold more books in the UK than I did in the US, even though it was based over there. So I think I only actually sold 2 books in the US compared to like 5 or 6 in the UK. So it is interesting that you know I feel like my background was more important than the geographic location where it
Yeah.
was. Um, but having said that, I also think the younger you go in terms of the age group that's intended, the intended readership, it might middle grade is the youngest I really understand. So for
Yeah.
middle grade books, it is very different. Like I feel like the UK is much more whimsical, much more open to like a high fantasy. The humor is different. The illustration style is quite different. We've only
Yeah.
recently jumped on board with graphic novels, which have been like very well established in the US for a long time. So the markets are actually quite different. Um, as you get older, like so, teen isn't really a thing in the US. Like it's sort of becoming a thing here again. Um, but YA, it does seem to be quite joined up, and you get many more deals for books where both are public. It's published both in the US and the UK for YA and crossover than you do the middle grade. I think no stats to back that up, but that's just what I've observed.
Yeah.
The other thing is the US market is I think about 5 times bigger than the UK market. So that just makes a huge difference as well. So the size of the deals that you're seeing in the US is going to be bigger than UK deals. Um, the number of books published is going to be greater in the US than the UK. So it kind of accounts for some of why, why maybe some authors are only published in one territory, because in the UK the market is too small to sustain all of the US published authors,
Yeah.
and the US is quite crowded, so it's not going to buy every UK book. So there's a lot of differences, but I do see in terms of trends and appetites in the adult and young adult fiction, it is quite in our very joined up world, it makes sense that is quite
Yeah.
in sync.
And for authors, based on either side of the pond, should they really be focusing on agents in their own country? Is that the most sensible thing to do, or can it work if you've got an agent in another country?
I think I'm biased obviously, but it can work because what you're really looking at is where does that agent sell? So like if you have a US agent who makes a lot of deals in the UK, then why not? It doesn't really matter where they're based. You don't need to, it is personal choice. So if you're the kind of author who is based in the UK, wants to have like, to go into the agent's office and like, have coffee with them and like have editorial chats in person and all of that kind of stuff, then yes, of course, like focus on UK agents, at least in the first instance. But it's perfectly possible to be a successful UK-based author with a US agent. And sometimes it can be advantageous if if you have that agent who's able to sell in both territories very easily, like it's really a no-brainer. Like, it's yeah, and I am seeing, I was gonna say, a lot more agents from both countries selling in both territories than I think was previously normal. So, that it goes the other way around too. If you're a US author and you're wondering whether to submit to a UK agent, if they accept submissions from the US or anywhere else, then do it. Like, they probably do sell books in the US as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
much more joined up than it used to be.
Yeah. And obviously you're currently, as we discussed, you're currently commissioning editor of MacMillan's children's books, and I just wondered, what is the process once you obviously get these submissions that you're looking at from agents and stuff like that, and then when you find the book that you want and you've persuaded the acquisitions team that this is a book that you're going to take forward, what is the process at that stage for a book?
So, So you make the offer as the next thing, and then there's a whole back and forth with the agent usually on, the terms and conditions and the advance level, and that can take weeks or it can take months. But once that's all finalized, um, the main thing is you kind of have to get on board with the author editorially even before any of this happens actually. So the process sort of started back before when you had, hopefully, like, a call or, like, some kind of
Yeah.
meeting with the author and discuss, like, what you want to do with the book editorially. So, in my experience, it's usually very much, like, broad strokes at this stage, like, just, I can't think of a good example, like, maybe we feel like the ending is a little rushed
Yeah.
and we're gonna need to add some more incident and some complexity there, or like, the word count's too high, so we're gonna need to do some cutting. So it's that kind of level, and just checking that the author is happy with all of that. So that when you get to the stage where you finalize the contract, you already have like some basic notes. You probably meet the author again or have another call because it's probably been a few months or at least a few weeks, um, and touch base and like send off your edit notes to them and give them a deadline. Can be very generous. It can be quite tight. Just depends when the book is publishing. But again, that would have been something that you discussed
Yeah.
previously, so it won't be a shock. Um, and yeah, the editorial process from there on out can be wildly different, for different projects. Some authors don't need much editing, especially if they're very experienced. So you might find that one or two sets of notes will get you to a point where you're happy. Other authors may need a bit more input, and both is absolutely fine. So in that case, you might go to line editing, which is where the editor will kind of go through the Word document line by line and use track changes and comments and, just mark up their thoughts sort of in more, specific detail.
Yeah.
Um, and then, once you've got to that stage where you're both happy with the manuscript, it goes off to copy edit. So there's two, so copy edits and proofreads are both done by external freelance editors. And in most big five publishers, probably, yeah, even smaller publishers usually, it's sort of hands off to another department. It's usually editorial management or sometimes production editors. So it's where I originally worked in
Yeah.
the company, and they will just basically finalize the text, get it completely ready for printing, and then it goes off to production. So the author is involved at every stage, checking and like making sure they're happy and like making any changes that are needed. So the whole process can take minimum, gosh, so from acquisition through to proofread, I mean, minimum is probably like a year. Uh, that could be longer, just, if the edits take a long time or if the pub date is like a long way off, like there's no need to rush.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very long process where you are perfecting the text and making sure, and of course, alongside all of that, you've got cover, you've got, about 6 months out, you'll start to get contact from publicity and marketing about what they'll be doing, any involvement you might have. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's like 90% waiting, and then
Yeah.
suddenly at the very end, it's like go, 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 go. Everything's very strange experience from the author side.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, have you ever had, pushback from an author with in suggestion to edits and things like that? I guess this is maybe something you can sort of scope out in that initial discussion. But yeah, I just wondered if there are ever any bumps in the road, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's entirely common for authors to disagree with suggestions. I mean, I think the best authors are probably the ones where you go back to them with all your specific suggestions and they're like, I don't know, like, I don't really like those suggestions, but I see why you've made the suggestions. I see the underlying problem, and here are my better suggestions usually to fix them, and that is great, and that's totally part of the process. I have had one or two authors who, were very resistant, and actually it's funny because those were the ones tended to be the ones where I wasn't the one to acquire the book, so it was
Right.
more like something I'd taken over. So for whatever reason, maybe because that link between the acquisitions editor and the person actually working on the book was broken, or maybe just because I don't know, it for whatever reason, those people did not want to make the edits, so it was
Yeah.
a bit. It's always a process of negotiation, and that was really no different. So I completely understand why it's difficult. I have been there on the other side as
Yeah.
well. So I think it's just a part of the process to a greater or lesser extent. But we all got there in the end. I've never had a book like cancelled or
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
like that. We always get there.
Yeah. And are you in your role, you said there's a lot more sort of admin and business side when you're an editor. I mean, are you getting contacted by agents as well daily saying, "Oh, I've got this, I'm going to send this to you," or is this of interest? Before the sort of formal submission that you might get from them.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I often have like coffees and meetups and Zooms with agents, which is great, and like it's all part of forming those really, really
Yeah.
important relationships. But yeah, you do get like the early pitches, or like I have something that's coming in like 3 months. I'm not quite done editing it, but it's really exciting, and this is what it is. Yeah, that's really common, and I'm constantly receiving emails from agents as well, just similar things. Agents I don't know, agents I do know, like it's a real mix. There are just so many agents out there now. It
Yeah.
is a bit overwhelming, but I think it's probably due to the demand from so many writers. So
Yeah.
can't really complain. It's
No.
a good
Exactly. And what in your view, or maybe what in the publishing house's view, makes a book a success? Is it only it's earned out and it's making money now, or can a book sometimes slightly underperform, but you're still pleased because it's got it out there and it's established the author and all of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think it is more complicated than just did it make a profit or not. And by the way, I didn't know this until recently, but books can make a profit without earning out,
Right.
um,
Okay.
which is something I don't yet quite understand. But basically, the publisher often is making a profit before the book
Right.
earns out.
Okay.
So the bar is lower than you think. Like if you're an author and you're like, oh, I haven't received any royalties yet, it could already be a profitable book. Anyway, what makes a book a success? Yes, commercial success, but also, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. So if the author wins like awards, if like you
Yeah.
said, it establishes the author well in a certain area, they get a lot of accolades. I think commercial success is like the sort of obvious
Yeah.
one, but there are different ways to approach it. And I think you can always make the argument, say you bought a book from an author, it's done okay, like maybe you overpaid slightly, but their next project is different and absolutely amazing, just like a cracking concept, and you feel like really confident about moving forward with it. I don't think that the record of, average sales on the previous book does always impact the next acquisition, because especially if it's a new concept in a new area, you're sort of saying this is a relaunch. This is
Yeah.
so yes, commercial success, but also I think it is wider than that, and there's more conversations to be had outside of that.
And does that also work for because we've heard your an author's previous sales record. So even if you haven't been the one that acquired their last book or whatever, but if they maybe had a bumpy um sales record, but they come to you with a new concept or in a new genre or something like that, does that give them an opportunity? Will they be given the full hearing, if you like, or is the sales record always something that's sort of hanging in the background that will play a part in the discussion?
I think it entirely depends on, or not entirely, but largely depends on if the new book, like the new concept, is in exactly the same area of the market. Because I think, to take an extreme example, if it's a sequel
Yeah,
to the one that hasn't done well, then you're like, well, if that one didn't do well, then that is a pretty good indication that this one won't do well. So it's
Yeah.
it's a very risky acquisition. But if they're, if there are grades of it. So say it's a standalone, it's in the same area of the market, you could make that argument too. But you could also say, the first one was a thriller, but this is a very different thriller, and we can position it differently in this way, and that's why we have a chance of doing better than the first book. But then, there's the other extreme where it's like completely different age group, completely different concept, completely different genre. Like there's for me personally, and I think what I'm seeing so far in at least in MacMillan is that people are open to investing in that talent and saying this was a really good author, like the first time around, for whatever reason, didn't get a fair shake. Like
Yeah.
let's try again with this amazing new book. So I think authors can get very twitchy about it, but I do think it's a little less black and white than you might think.
Yeah, okay, that's probably reassuring to hear for people. And I wanted to ask as well about, obviously we've mentioned middle grade, young adult, and all of this, and teen as well. These are in many ways. I think authors often think that these things are almost marketing terms, as opposed to, they don't set out to write necessarily, I'm going to write a teen book, or as opposed to a young adult book, or an adult book, or whatever. How do you decide where these books fit in terms of genre category, and how much does it matter?
I think it matters enormously because I think even as a writer, you need to know who you're writing for. Like um it's not as simple as I write this story and then, marketing people decide where it fits. You need to have that reader in mind from the very beginning, whether it's your own 12-year-old self or, a 17-year-old nephew or what, you need to be picturing someone that you're addressing and telling this story to. And I think that there are so many requirements when you actually think of it that way. Like you couldn't write a 90,000 word epic fantasy for a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
Like there are like common sense restrictions, but then at the same time there are also market expectations that are often shifting. So you're going to make it very hard for yourself if you're not picturing that reader, but also keeping on top of like what's expected of various different age groups and how your book is specifically going to fit into that. Uh, to take an example, about 5 years ago, it was considered perfectly normal for a upper middle grade novel to be about 60,000 words long, like, and have be quite, dense and um, lyrical and all of that stuff. And now the market has changed partly because of COVID and the reading difficulties that have come with that for middle grade readers. And everything is much shorter, much more around the 40K mark,
Right.
more
Okay.
illustrated. If you're just ignoring that, you're gonna just put up hurdles for yourself. So
Yeah.
you might well, put your publishing hat on a little bit and be like, no, who is this for? Who am I picturing? And what do they need like now?
I mean, that's interesting because, often, you hear this phrase "right to market" and all, and should authors write to market? And often, people will say, no, you've got to write the story that you wanted to tell. But I suppose that's, those two things aren't separate necessarily. Have an eye on the market, write the story you want to tell, but then know where it's going to fit in the market. And,
Yeah.
and that's how you
And
pitch it, at least. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. And I think sometimes when you say right to market, it sounds like what you're saying is follow trends.
Mhm.
And I think what I'm saying is there's, writing the story of your heart, which you should, but then also knowing where it fits, which is, if you want to be a professional writer, is really important. So yeah, I don't think they're opposed.
hmm And one thing we've been asking everyone on this run of episodes is about, speaking of trends, the dreaded AI, and, what impact that has had, what impact you think it will have on the industry, and then, as an editor, what you think it would do to your role.
I'm going to be really honest and say I hate AI. I really hate
That's fair
it.
enough.
Um,
That's not an uncommon view. Don't worry, on this podcast.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, so from a publishing point of view, it's coming into publishing, but it's not really being used creatively. So what I'm seeing is like a lot of talk about how we use it to make us more efficient or to take, small administrative jobs off our plate so we can
Yeah.
focus on the big picture, which, in theory, I'm okay with. In practice, it feels like I'm cheating if I use AI, but anyway, that's off to one side. I think the big conversations that are being had are around, what do we bring to the table that's, different from what would be readily available for anyone, and that
Yeah.
is human created content that's high quality, beautifully produced and original. And that's the thing about AI is nothing that it produces is original because it's literally regurgitating content from books and other places,
That it often hasn't
largely
paid for.
yes, exactly. They're all pirated. It's nothing about AI content will be original. There may one day be a market for that stuff, but it's not going to be something that traditional publishers can really compete with anyway. So why not focus on what we do well? And that is supporting human creators and putting out, those books into the world, which I think there is still most people who read books will value that over AI slop that they can generate for free.
And
Um,
yeah, I suppose the difficulty is those people that will use it to, you know, write or assist the writing or something, but not necessarily say that. But it might result in more, I think another worry is that the markets or certainly the agents get flooded with lots of stuff that they then have to work through, and it sort of, you know, blocks everything up for people that are actually trying to do it in the
yeah.
old fashioned way.
I mean, so my limited experience of this, because I think it is going up all the time, and I left agenting in July now, so about 6 months ago. Um, so my limited experience of this was that I didn't receive all that many AI generate. I could tell when I did, like it was
Yeah,
the quality was very low. Um, there are also various filters. So in the US, there's a system, Query Manager and Query Tracker, that
yeah,
most agents use, and it actually has filters on it for AI generated content. I don't know how good those filters are, like frankly, but I think is a really positive step that most agents should be, trying to replicate in some way to stop that from happening. Because I think the worst thing would be exactly what you said if it's just putting more barriers in the way of genuine authors. But I think most, I think all agents that I know hate that,
yeah,
that it's a thing now and that they have to consider this. When it comes to using AI, editing aids or writing aids, I still feel pretty uncomfortable with it, to be honest. And I think, that with Query Tracker and Query Manager, there is a tick box where you have to say, I did not use
yeah.
AI to help me write this as well. So I don't know. I think it is complicated and getting more complicated. I definitely fall down on the side of I think writing is a human endeavor
Yeah.
and we can't, cheat. And I think it would be unsatisfying to cheat actually and use that kind of help. But I don't know. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe there's ways that it can come into the creative process, but I feel deeply uncomfortable with it, and I think most agents and editors do.
As I say, that is it's pretty much the universal response to this. So don't worry, you're in the right place to say that.
Love
And with you, I just wanted to touch on. Obviously, you have also written books yourself, 3 published books, and I just wondered, is that something you're still doing? Are you still writing as well in your spare time as well? What spare time
Yeah,
do
in
you
my that's the issue really. I mean, really, so I've had 3 books published by Bloomsbury in the UK. The last one was in 23. They were all in like the YA space. I wrote one more book after that, but unfortunately it was turned down by the publisher and didn't sell anywhere else. So since then, which I think that was like 2024 maybe. So since then I have been working on something else, but I think like with anyone who goes through writing rejection, it is sometimes a bit hard to like pick yourself back up and be
Yeah.
like, no, I can do this. So I think yes, but also I am very much struggling with it, and hoping that one day I can get another deal or even finish another book. There's always that moment with everything. I don't know if you find this, but everything that I write where I'm like, I actually can't do this. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
how I did it. I can't do it again. So I'm going through that moment at the moment. So
No, I definitely. I think it's that sort of. It's especially in the sort of 30,000 to 50,000 word. If it's a 90,000 word book, it's that middle section. You suddenly start thinking, "God, this is terrible."
yeah,
It's just
I am actually at
30,000. Yeah,
30,000. So I'm bang on like a
yeah,
third. And I'm like, no.
yeah. But I think, yeah. What we've learned, what I've learned from my own writing, what we've learned from our guests and stuff, is often you push through that stage, and then at the end you've got a finished book, and you can then always go back to that and fix it and work around it and stuff like that. And it's much easier
Editing,
to put something you've got than
yeah,
going.
editing's so much easier than
Yeah,
drafting, in my
yeah,
view. But yeah.
yeah, definitely. And just to sort of wrap up the main questions, what advice would you give to um, you know people out there, authors just now in this current market? What would you say to them?
I say it does probably look really, really tough from the outside, and it is tough, it's competitive. But I think the best thing you can do is to really focus on writing good quality books and books that you really care about, and making sure at the same time that you're reading a lot. Because I think all of what I've been saying about know what's going on in the market, it sounds very
Mhm.
cold, but basically it means reading books that are being published now and keeping up
Yeah,
to date. So I'd say read a lot, write a lot, keep writing what you're passionate about. Think about stuff like concept and like pitching and all of that if it helps you. But at the end of the day, what's really going to matter is like, have you written an amazing book?
yeah,
And I think that can so often just be lost among all the chit chat about how to get an agent and how to get published.
yeah.
Is actually at root we're talking about doing something that you love and enjoying it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And what about for people that would like to get on into the other side of the industry, whether it's agenting or editing or something like that? Have you got any advice how they could take the first steps there?
I feel like my experience is so out of date with getting into publishing and with you know this side of publishing, this publishing side of publishing as it were. With agenting, it's a lot of like reaching out to people and like offering your time, it you know reading for people if you can. I did intern at a literary agency way back. I know that still agencies do that, and there are some really big ones like the Curtis Brown internship, stuff like that. All of those are like the obvious ones, but just making yourself known to a lot of people on the agency side of things goes a long way, and being sort of willing to do stuff for free, sadly. And in my experience, but this was back in like 2012, it was similar on the publishing side. I did a lot of internships for like expenses only type stuff, and
Yeah.
I think it's changing a bit now, though. I think there's a lot more ways into the industry. Like we have an apprentice here now who's like paid and going through like an official route. So
Uh,
it's like a publishing apprentice. You can also do that like if you're transitioning careers. So it's not just for like people who've just graduated. There's also like stuff like creative access, which has is all about basically disadvantaged people, whether that's from outside of London or racially disadvantaged, or like it's
Yeah.
interpreted very widely, helping those people get creative jobs. So all of this is you know as far as I'm aware since I started publishing. So I would just say be as plugged in as possible, like follow all the people you can, like whether it's on LinkedIn or used to be Twitter that was useful, but I don't know, Instagram or Blue Sky, whatever. Just listen to what people are saying and be aware of those opportunities, and jump on them wherever you can. But yeah, it's super competitive, but also publishing is a very friendly industry. So once you're in, it's a great place to work, really, publishing. It's not very well paid, but the books make up for it.
Well, that's great. Those were the main questions that I had for you today, but we always quickly end our podcast by asking our guests the same questions. The first of which is, what was the last book that you read that you can tell us about, I guess?
Yeah, so I read, it's coming out in the new year, so I think January or February, Mother Faker.
Right.
And it's about a woman who fakes a pregnancy in order to get the
Okay.
parental leave, and it all goes hilariously wrong. It's really, really good. So yeah, and oh, sorry, what was the other question?
No, that was it for the
That
book.
was it.
But
Okay.
then the next one is, what was the last film that you watched?
Oh, film. I actually started High to Low, which is the Spike Lee film on Apple
Oh yeah,
TV.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
was watching it last night. It's really not what I expected. You know, when you like go into it thinking it's going to be like an action movie, and it was like a kidnapping story, and it has like very cool bits to it, but it's a lot more of like a character study. Like I'm enjoying it, but yeah, we'll have to see what I ultimately. It's just when something doesn't quite like meet what you're expecting, and you're like,
yeah.
huh, interesting. But I definitely recommend dipping in. It's very cool. At least cinematically, it's all New York, and just glorious. It has
Excellent,
soundtrack and
excellent.
everything.
I'll check that out. And what about TV? What are you watching on TV at the moment?
Oh, I'm watching A Gentleman in Moscow, which I read the
Oh
book.
yeah,
So good. I love it. Like it's, that perfect mix of actually it's quite gentle, but also there's a lot of peril and instant in
yeah.
it. And just, set in early, I guess it's after Russian Revolution, so like 1910s Russia, I think.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, just gorgeous. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. And then the very, very last thing we always do is a very quick fire either or, to which Tarek always says there is no right answer or no wrong answer apart from one of them. Yeah, I'll go for writing or editing.
Don't. I think editing right now. Editing's easier.
Okay.
That.
TV or cinema?
Cinema.
Night owl or early bird?
Night owl.
Music or no music when you are writing?
No music. Complete silence. Or cafe. That
Okay.
works.
And then last one, real book or ebook?
Real book. 100%. Too many of them all stacked up.
Excellent. Yes, excellent. Well, that was great. Thanks very much, Kesia. That was brilliant.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks very much to Kesia for coming on there and chatting with me. And once again, apologies for my poor sound there, and probably poor questions as well. But she gave a lot of really good insights there. But what I thought was interesting, one thing I thought was interesting was, the idea of a book being what makes a book a success from the point of view of a publisher, and you obviously think the only time a book is a success from a publisher point of view is if it's earned out and if it's earning royalties, then they'll think it's a success. But it was, I suppose, pleasing to hear from an author's perspective that isn't always the case. A book can be a success in their eyes in different ways if there's awards won, or if it has put that author in a new market where they can grow. They've got good ideas to then grow something else. At the same time, as Kesia said, as we've heard from other people as well, if you've got a poor sales record in a certain genre or something and you want to keep writing in that genre, that's when it can get more tricky. If you're more willing to change and adapt and write different types of stories, then you have, I think, more of a chance to then keep getting picked up and published and things like that.
It's definitely something that we've chatted to. We had a very similar conversation with Phoebe Morgan about the issue of how do a publisher look at previous sales records, and I know it's something which a lot of authors are always quite stressed about. If I've not sold very well, will I get picked up for another book? Will they bother putting much marketing behind it, etc.? And I think it is. I think you're right. I think Kesia's viewpoint is more hopeful, more kind of uplifting, I suppose, than other people's viewpoint might be. But I think my take home message from all of the people that we've spoken to about this topic is that if you're willing to make changes, whether it's a name or a genre, you know, they are willing to work with you to try and get your book out there if you're willing to work with them and meet them halfway. And I think, you know, if you have, as you said, if you've been writing crime and your crime books have not been selling, that might be a tougher sell than if you take a name change or write a slightly different genre or a crime adjacent. You know, there's ways of getting round it, and it's never, I don't think it's ever a death knell or the end of your career if your last few books haven't sold. I don't think that means.
No, it can be tougher.
Finished.
It can definitely
it can
be
tougher, and you might need to make sacrifices in terms of what you write or who you write under. But I think if you are still passionate about wanting to write and get your work out there, I think there's always a way, and I think you will find publishers willing to make it work with you. You know, if you can work as a team together.
Yeah. So thanks very much to Kesia for coming on and chatting. You know, and you know, we had actually someone in the YouTube comments had said, you know, it would be good to hear a perspective from the US, UK markets and stuff like that. So we had a bit of a chat about that there as well, which was interesting as well. But that is the end of this current run of industry episodes, but that doesn't mean the podcast stops. No, I just love editing too much. I don't want any free time. So as I mentioned at the start, next week is a huge milestone, and genuinely not a milestone that I thought we were going to reach. 250 episodes.
When we were sat in that recording episode 1, sat in the boardroom of a law firm chatting to a lawyer come author, who would have thought we'd be here speaking in much better microphones, much more.
And having spoken to some of the authors we've spoken to is incredible. You know?
Genuinely, and we'll look back over the list of people that we chatted to in the past. It's genuinely amazing and phenomenal how we've chatted to some people who are proper heroes of ours. I think it's been a proper privilege to chat to. And as you say, episode 250, I think is no exception to that rule of incredible guests that we're getting on, because we are chatting with the wonderful Joe Hill next week, who, of course, is author of books like Horns, Nosferatu. The new King Sorrow is his latest release.
I'm reading that right now and really enjoying it.
I've got it on my shelf to read next. I've heard nothing but amazing things about it. It's a massive tome. But and of course, Joe Hill is also the son of Stephen King, who he's very open about that in our chat with him about what it was like, you know, not wanting to be known as that, trying to write something away from the shadow of that, etc., and how that's kind of changed, and it's a very, very open, interesting conversation we have about his writing career and how hard he found it. I think, you know, going from to break into the novel and I guess not using that temptation of saying who he is, but wanting to do it on his own name and writing shorts and breaking in. So it's a really interesting chat. I think there's a lot to learn from it.
It is. It's a really interesting and really fun chat. He's just a really amiable, interesting person to speak with. Yeah. So, it's a great guest for our 250th episode. So please do tune in for that one. If you've enjoyed today's episode, or indeed the recent industry episodes, then please do take the time to rate and review us on your favourite podcast app, as that helps us to continue to get great guests on the podcast. Tell people about the podcast. If you think they'd like it, that would be great, because we'd love to continue to grow our podcast. And you know, you can leave us ratings, leave us comments under YouTube, all of that sort of stuff. So that all really does help against the algorithm that exists everywhere nowadays. That
we all serve under.
Yes, indeed.
And of course, if you want to get in touch with us in other ways other than the YouTube comment, you can always go to any of the still functioning social medias and search for @UKPage1 and find us, send us a message. You can send us an email directly, which is podcast@rightgear.co.uk, or you can join the Patreon. You can join for free. You can come on the Discord. You can chat to us and other members of the Discord, of the Patreon on the Discord there. Multiple ways of getting in touch.
Yeah, indeed.
Please do. We'd love to hear from you.
There's other tiers in the Patreon as well that have great benefits, including early access and all that sort of thing. Yeah. But you can check that out. We'll put a link in the podcast description. Speaking of emails, Tarek, I continually get what are clearly AI generated emails telling me how great the Night Watcher is and what a character Callie Munro was.
Honestly, there seems to be some kind of epidemic at the moment and they're all worded the exact same way.
Exactly.
I've never felt so shaken to my core when it's all over the top. It's bonkers. I really can't imagine anyone genuinely falling for it. But
So it would be nice to get a break from those emails and hear from some of our
a real
listeners.
person actually sitting down and writing something. That'd be nice.
Exactly. But otherwise, have a great week, and we'll see you for our big episode next week.
See you later.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode like these ones down here.
And if you want to get in touch, you can do so by finding us on our social media platforms up here, or drop us a comment way down below there.
But otherwise, thanks for listening, and join us for the next episode.
See you later.